Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, August 10th. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. And we open with the exciting news from Rio, with judoka Yarden Jerby bringing the country enormous pride, winning the first Israeli medal at this year's Olympic Games. After an exhausting day of battles, the 27-year-old Jerby took the bronze by defeating her Japanese opponent, Miku Tusharo, in the consolation match. Jerby broke into tears after the victory and did not stop pointing at the Israeli flag on her uniform. Jerby is only the 7th Israeli athlete and the 2nd woman in the country's history to win an Olympic medal, bringing the Israeli total to 8. Along with the bronze medal, she wins $250,000 shekels in prize money. Among the many calls she received wishing her congratulations was one from President Reuven Rivlin and another from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. "I can't believe it. Wake me up," Jerby said, adding that this is a dream come true for her. "I've invested my entire life in this, and it paid off. Congratulations." Doctors at public hospitals are set to launch a 24-hour strike tomorrow at 8 a.m. in protest of what the Israel Medical Association calls the health system's starvation diet. Doctors will switch to Shabbat protocol until Friday morning, meaning they will refuse to perform anything but emergency procedures. Organizers say the dramatic step is intended to warn the government that the health system will collapse without additional resources. The Medical Association warns the government's planned arrangements bill will harm the health system and demands the government negotiate any future changes. It has a series of other demands relating to pressures placed on doctors and limited resources. The strike was originally called over plans to prohibit doctors from undertaking private work, but that proposal has since been canceled. Doctors claim the state has breached the recent collective wage agreement with them, which otherwise prohibits strikes until 2019. Police in Jerusalem intend to boost their presence in 5 East Jerusalem neighborhoods: Atur, Beit Safafa, Jabal Mukaber, Issawiya, and Sur Bahar. The new steps are part of a widespread plan aimed at boosting security and preventing the neighborhoods from becoming points of friction and a target for stone throwing. Police will operate out of existing buildings that already offer services to the local community. The proposal, announced by Jerusalem Police Chief Yoram Halevi, calls for a widespread plan that will be implemented over the next 4 to 6 years and calls for 1,200 additional police officers to be recruited and deployed in the capital. Hundreds of surveillance cameras will be set up and connected to a system called Jerusalem View, similar to those already installed in the Old City. Eventually, streetlights and cameras on the light rail will also be linked up to the same system. A statement released by police said the plan aims to make changes that are adapted to the security situation while meeting the daily needs of local residents and helping to improve the quality of life. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's son, Yair, will reportedly be summoned by police to give testimony on the investigation into allegations relating to his father concerning campaign funding in past elections. Citing sources in law enforcement, a Channel 10 report said Yair's testimony is considered to be relevant to the ongoing probe. Last month, Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit ordered a preliminary probe into the charges against Netanyahu that involves suspicions of money laundering. Netanyahu is yet to be questioned by police. The Prime Minister's office continues to deny any wrongdoing, saying police will come up empty-handed. However, a recent report in the Haaretz newspaper said police were checking whether the money was transferred from businessmen abroad to Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, and Yair for their personal use. Details of the ongoing investigation against Netanyahu come amid efforts by Likud MK David Amsalem, who intends to propose a bill in the next Knesset session that would shield the Prime Minister from being investigated on minor offenses while he is still in the office. Joining us in the studio is Michael Parham of the Movement for Quality Government. Michael, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
In recent months, there appears to be a sharp increase in the number of police investigations involving Prime Minister Netanyahu. Should he be required to step down while he is under suspicion?
No, at this stage not. He shouldn't be required to step down, but certainly the investigations should go forward. They should be extensive, comprehensive, and rapid. It's not a good thing that the Prime Minister is under suspicion for wrongdoing. The suspicion should be cleared up as soon as possible. If charges need to be filed, then the Attorney General can decide to file those charges. And at that juncture, we'll have to see whether the Prime Minister has to step down. In the past, the norm that has developed here is that when an indictment is handed down, the Prime Minister will step down.
Michael, just yesterday, Likud MK David Amsalem announced that he was going to propose a bill that would prevent the Prime Minister from being investigated on what they call minor offenses while he is in office. What would be the implications of this if it managed to pass?
Well, it seems to be more a publicity stunt meant to curry favor with the party bosses. We certainly, as the Movement for Quality Government, and I think right-minded citizens would naturally oppose such legislation. I don't think it has, I hope it doesn't have a chance of passing. And the problem is when you say minor offenses, we have here, first of all, a tradition now of that no one is above the law, and that even the Prime Minister and the other ministers can be investigated, and if they're found convicted of criminal activity. We think that's a healthy norm for democracy, and deviating from that norm, even if it means so-called minor offenses, is a slippery slope which would really, and it seems to be intended, to halt any investigations. You know, many investigations begin with so-called minor offenses, and so, in fact, this legislation probably intends to shut down any investigation of the Prime Minister while he's Prime Minister.
Michael, the Prime Minister continues to hold a number of portfolios rather than delegating them to others. Is it possible for a ministry to be run effectively like this?
No, actually. As a matter of fact, we have a serious flaw in our democracy. We know it's a parliamentary democracy. We know that the ministers are politicians. They have their one eye on their political base, but their other eye should be on the office. They're charged with the executive functions, and the ministries have to be run. Without a functioning Prime Minister or minister, the ministries aren't run as well as they should be, and the task of the executive is to execute. So when a minister is very part-time, maybe 1/4, 1/8, 1/10 of his time, the execution will, of course, be flawed, unless the idea is to just let the public, the civil servants, run everything, and maybe that's for the best. I don't know.
The finance minister is proposing a new tax on apartments held for investment. Many members of the Knesset themselves own more than one apartment. Should they recuse themselves from the vote because of a conflict of interest?
Well, that's an interesting question, but I think that framed that way, you sort of set up a conflict of interest. But in fact, on most issues of taxation and fiscal matters, members of Knesset and ministers are conflicted if you raise taxes, so they may have to pay more taxes. I wouldn't look at this as necessarily a conflict of interest issue, but more as just a taxation issue. And in that respect, as a movement and quality government, we have no stand.
One last question. We heard Culture Minister Miri Regev last week express shock that the state would not be able to control the new public broadcasting corporation. Given that such a body would be funded by the state, what sort of oversight is illegitimate for the government to exercise?
You know, this whole reorganization of the public broadcasting has been a bit of a debacle as far as I can see. And I believe the idea was in fact to get rid of many people entrenched interests in the broadcast authority and to save money on salaries. Other than that, it's clear, I think, to everyone that the government will continue to exercise as much influence on public broadcasting as it is allowed. So it's really up for the citizens and such movements as the Movement for Quality Government to do all that they can to ensure the insulation of public broadcasting from political influences. But I don't think it was naive to think that the government is going to do it voluntarily, to rein itself in voluntarily.
Michael Pardon from the Movement for Quality Government. Always great to have you. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
Hundreds of people attended the memorial ceremony for Lieutenant Hadar Goldin at the Kfar Saba Military Cemetery yesterday. Goldin was killed during Operation Protective Edge in 2014, and his body is still being held by Hamas. You were a lighthouse, and now you're not here. The lighthouse is missing, his sister Ayelet said. His father, Simcha, vowed to return his son's body and that of soldier Oron Shaul, also killed in the Gaza war, saying the family won't rest and won't be deterred. He also criticized the government leadership for failing to act. Government ministers Ayelet Shaked, Tzachi Hanegbi, Yoav Gallant, Eli Ben-Dahan, and Michael Oren attended the ceremony. Heads of the country's regional and local councils are threatening to wage a strike starting August 31st in protest of the arrangements bill, which they say will harm the services in their communities, particularly education. The government is set to vote on the budget submitted by Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon tomorrow, which calls for a 2 billion shekel cut in the local and regional council's annual budget. At a press conference today, council heads said the strike will affect all community services to the public, as well as schools, as there will be no security guards posted outside learning institutions. The recent arrest by Israeli security forces of Wahid Borish, an engineer who worked for the UN developmental program in Gaza Strip, who allegedly used resources given to him by the UN group to assist Hamas military wing, is the second incident in recent weeks in which Palestinians were recruited by Hamas and misused international funds allocated for aid to boost the terror organization's military capability.
This is the second time in a week in which Israel has uncovered and exposed the fact that Hamas operatives systematically infiltrated so-called aid organizations and humanitarian organizations. And what's so cynical and disgusting here is that money and support that was intended for people who really needed it, children and the elderly, people whose homes were destroyed, instead of this money going to help people, Hamas diverted it in order to build a war machine, to kill Israeli civilians, to continue a war. It's hard to think of a more disgusting and outrageous misuse of funds than this.
With municipal elections in the Palestinian Authority fast approaching, the Hamas terror group in Gaza released a propaganda video clip this week portraying a thriving coastal enclave under Hamas rule, striving to sell it as one of the best places to live in the Middle East. IBA's Margot Dudkevich has that story.
The high-definition video clip endeavors to portray the Gaza enclave as paradise, with aerial shots showing sprawling villas, swimming pools, high-rise modern buildings, universities and parks. Smiling Palestinians from all walks of life are filmed at various locations, holding signs in Arabic with the hashtag "Thank you, Hamas." One of the most disturbing images shown in the clip is a metallic fist statue clutching a replica of fallen Israeli soldier Oron Shaul's dog tag. The statue is perched upon what appears to be an Israeli armored personnel carrier. Intent on selling an illusion of paradise in the Gaza enclave, the clip deftly ignores the harsh reality on the ground, the high unemployment rate, the daily power outages, and the neighborhoods damaged during Operation Protective Edge 2 years ago that have yet to be rebuilt. You will not see any footage showing the areas where civilians are forced to live in shacks, because Hamas, instead of rebuilding their homes, opted to use the millions of dollars in donations sent from abroad to boost its military capability, instead of refurbishing the Gaza Strip and improving the lifestyle for Palestinian civilians. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
Police arrested 13 protesters after Jewish and Arab demonstrators traded punches outside the Barzilai hospital in Ashkelon last night, where Palestinian prisoner Belil Qaid is hospitalized after refusing food for 56 days. Doctors say Qaid's health is deteriorating after he launched a hunger strike to protest his detention without trial. Arab Knesset members were among supporters taking part in the solidarity rally outside the hospital under a heavy police presence. Opposite a counter-rally was held by right-wing extremists. As tensions heightened, protesters from both sides began verbally and physically abusing each other until police intervened and detained some of the demonstrators. The British Labour Party might be forced to cancel its annual party conference if it cannot find a replacement for security contractors G4S, which Labour is boycotting over its contracts with Israel. Last November, Labour's National Executive Committee voted to boycott the private security firm over its services to Israeli prisons. According to leaked emails disclosed to the Telegraph newspaper, the party has failed to find an alternative, meaning the Home Office and police would be empowered to shut down the conference for having inadequate security arrangements. Israel is becoming a fashion hub, and a delegation of 35 Jewish fashionistas from abroad got an exclusive peek at Israeli designs during a private runway event in Tel Aviv last week. We get more from IBA's Ariel Sullivan.
Elegant models, avant-garde Israeli designs, and swank Tel Aviv. This was the setting for a unique meeting between Jewish fashion industry mavens from around the world and Israel's top fashion designers. The trip, organized by the Jewish Women's Renaissance Project and sponsored by the Israeli Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, was designed to give the women a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the Israeli fashion industry and to allow them to gain inspiration from both Israeli designers and from the land of Israel.
I've been in fashion for many years in many different roles, and we've been very honored tonight to see this fashion show, which was unbelievable. It was like the creme de la creme of Israeli fashion, and all of us sitting here were absolutely amazed at the level of intricacy and design and fabrication, styling, and the models. It was such a treat for us to be here. So we thank the Israeli community for having us. And I think we'll all take back a new respect for Israeli designers and hopefully be able to get them into our countries more.
Besides Australia, the fashionistas came from the US, Canada, Estonia, Greece, Panama, and South Africa. The Momentum trip also brought them to key spots on Israel's fashion map and drew inspiration from Israeli designers whose clothing represents the casual elegance of Israeli culture.
The clothes I manufacture have got a very casual elegance to them because actually the inspiration is my country, my culture, and our style of living.
Clearly enjoying the human and fashion beauty on the runway, these visiting fashionistas said the trip inspired them to create a synergy in their future designs.
There's definitely a cultural experience that comes with the exposure of Israeli fashion. I think the free spirit, the bohemian chicness, I think the influence of nature is so strong and powerful, and I think when you combine that with the Canadian and American vibe, you've got the greatest chemistry ever.
Ariel Sullivan for IBA News.
Israel appears to be heading towards total gridlock, if latest market predictions showing that some 300,000 new cars will be sold this year are proven correct. A report listing the number of cars deliveries for the first 7 months of this year states 192,000 cars have already been delivered, a 15% increase from last year. A report submitted to the Knesset Economics Affairs Committee and published this month reveals the number of vehicles between 2004 and 2014 grew over 45%. However, the length of roads during the same period only grew by 9.2%. The study recommended investing in upgrading public transport and the motivation of drivers to switch to it. Another proposal suggests expanding public transport lanes at the expense of roads currently used by motorists, increased traffic fines, and enforcement. However, critics say this will only increase traffic jams and eventually force drivers to choose public transport, even if it is inadequate. In the future, some believe we will eat food made from algae, grow our crops on the walls of urban buildings, and devour genetically modified vegetables. One can get a glimpse of this future at a special summer exhibit at the Jerusalem Science Museum. IBA's Ariel Sullivan brings us this report from the interactive Fields of Tomorrow experience.
Most of the food we eat today is processed, made from three main crops: rice, corn, and wheat. But at this new exhibit in Jerusalem's Bloomfield Science Museum, visitors are finding that in the future, agricultural innovations are required if there will be enough to feed the world.
People actually try and see that food is not grown in supermarkets. Food is grown in the fields, and we're seeing how food developed and evolved from the natural source to what we have today in agriculture. We can see through all kinds of different exhibitions how food evolved, and I'd like to take you to the green wall outside to show you how we can grow food inside. We can actually grow on buildings the food that we eat and then create a solution for this problem.
So you think in the future the farms will be in the city?
I'm thinking more and more people will have to and maybe want to grow their own food in order to secure that it's good for them and to have their food security depending on them.
Some of the food of the future will be grown in water. It's called spirulina and it's full of protein.
It's a green algae that's full protein, and it could be the food of the future because it's very, very easy to produce, and it's very, very nutritious. You can really create it in very, very small laboratories and produce food that is very nutritious for the food crisis that we are looking for ahead.
It doesn't look very pretty.
It doesn't look very pretty, but even today you can see it in most shake bars in Tel Aviv. You can see it that people eat it. It's tasteless and it's very, very nutritious, and with some process it could really be something that is very widespread.
The exhibit includes both indoor and outdoor areas and invites visitors to learn about the hydroponic agriculture, scientific demonstrations, taste and smell workshops, and more. The Jerusalem Science Museum is open every day during the month of August and guarantees hours of fun and learning for the whole family. Ariel Sullivan for IBA News.
In local money matters, shares were mixed on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, while the shekel was mixed in foreign currency trading. Here are the numbers. And the IBA weather team says the forecast calls for partly cloudy skies and a slight drop in temperatures tomorrow, especially in the hilly regions. Here are the highs and lows. And that's all for this newscast. Please join us again tomorrow, same time, same channel, when Elon Aslan Levy will be back at this desk. I'm Laura Cornfield, wishing you a good evening and shalom from Jerusalem.